Imagine spending years, maybe even decades, building a career, a life, inside a virtual world, only to watch the very rules that made it all work just slowly start to crumble. So today, we're going to dive into what feels like a real crisis of faith unfolding in Entropia universe, one of the oldest and most complex online games out there. The community's asking a really tough question. Has the game they love been fundamentally mismanaged? We're going to break down their arguments straight from the players themselves. So, what kicked this whole thing off was a simple forum poll. Someone asked the players if the developer, MindArc, had mismanaged the game's professions and its systems. And the response? It was an absolute landslide. We're talking nearly 90% of voters saying yes. A number that high? Well, that's not just a complaint. It's a verdict. And it really makes you ask, what exactly went so wrong? The person who started this whole firestorm was a longtime player who goes by the name True Juan. They put up this incredibly detailed post arguing that the developers have been systematically taking apart key pieces of the game. And not because they're evil, but because they just don't seem to understand their own complex creation anymore. So, what were these so-called destroyed systems? And this gets us right to the heart of the argument. See, this isn't about one bad update or a single bug. According to these players, it's about a pattern of changes over time that has just steadily wiped out entire career paths, professions that used to be the absolute backbone of the game's society and its unique real cash economy. Okay, first up, the medic profession. Back in the day, if you were a hunter going after some massive creature, you needed a healer with you. Simple as that. This created an entire service profession. But then, the developers introduced things like lifesteal that let you heal yourself. And here's the real kicker. As Truan points out, lifesteal has no decay. It doesn't cost anything to use over time. That single change pretty much made an entire player-run profession obsolete overnight. All right, next, take a look at tailors and colorers. For years, their whole business was making cool, unique clothes for players who just wanted to look good and stand out. Then, the developers started adding these powerful statistical bonuses or buffs to specific clothes you couldn't get from players. All of a sudden, what you wore wasn't about style anymore. It was purely about having the best stats. The demand for player-crafted fashion just, poof, vanished. And this next one really shows a core problem in managing any online world. In the old days, you started the game with very few ways to customize your character. If you wanted a unique look, you had to go find a player who was a beautician. It created a whole service industry. Now, all those options are just available right at the beginning. Sure, it's more convenient for new players, but that convenience came at a cost. It basically killed another entire profession. And honestly, the list just goes on and on. The original post talks about this whole cascade of systems that players feel are just broken now. Landowners who spent a ton of money on property have no new incentives. The entire pet taming system is basically useless. Group activities like beacons and land grabs have been dumbed down so much that you don't even need teamwork anymore. Each of these things was once a real, engaging path you could take in the game. Now, Truan wasn't just shouting into an empty room. That forum thread absolutely exploded with responses. It revealed a whole community that's been grappling with these changes, and honestly, it paints a much, much more complete picture of what's going on. And what's fascinating is that not everyone sees these changes as a bad thing. Here's a user named Alina who points out that lifesteal, the very thing that killed the medic profession, was an amazing quality of life upgrade for hunters. This just perfectly highlights the developer's dilemma, right? A change that helps one group of players can completely destroy the livelihood of another. This quote here from the user Phoenix, man, it just perfectly captures the conflict that so many players are feeling. They get the convenience, they love how easy lifesteal makes things, but they also see the damage it did to the game's economy, so they also hate it. It's this tug of war between what's easy for me personally and what's good for the health of the entire world that's right at the center of this debate. And then you get the raw emotion. An event called Resource Mayhem comes up again and again. This quote from Bikuni shows you the deep personal impact of all these changes. This isn't just about pixels on a screen. For a lot of people, it's about feeling like their time, their real money investment, and their in-game dreams have just been completely betrayed. And it didn't just stop with that initial list. Other players started jumping in, adding their own examples to the fire. They talked about professions from gardening to just running a shop to crafting armor. The feeling of decay is clearly widespread, and it really reinforces this idea that these aren't just one-off problems, but symptoms of a systemic issue that's hitting the game's core economic pillars. So all these different threads of frustration, they start to weave together. And it leads the community to ask a much bigger and honestly more troubling question. Are these just a bunch of mistakes? Or do they point to something much deeper? A crisis of vision at the developer, Mindark. A forum user named Angel02 Mercer offers this really compelling theory that seems to have hit a nerve with a lot of people. They argue that for more than a decade, the developer hasn't really been focused on improving the core game at all. Instead, they've just been chasing buzzwords, jumping from one hot tech trend to the next without ever really finishing or committing to anything. And when you actually lay it out like this, you can see the pattern players are talking about. They've seen the company pivot from virtual properties to trying Pokemon-style systems, to blockchain, then the metaverse, then a new game engine, and now to AI. The feeling is that these grand ideas get announced and then they just quietly get left behind as the company runs off to chase the next shiny object. And this all feeds into a growing feeling that the developer's entire strategy has changed. Players feel like the focus has shifted away from trying to get more players into the game and towards squeezing the absolute most money out of the players they already have. They see these destroyed professions not as mistakes, but as collateral damage in a bigger shift towards a model that just lacks any clear long-term vision for the game's health. So, where does all this leave the average player today? If the old professions are basically gone and the developer's focus seems to be jumping all over the place, what's the actual point of playing Entropia Universe right now? Well, according to the players in this thread, the picture they paint is pretty bleak. They describe a game where you have a very low chance of ever breaking even financially, the loot is uninteresting, there are fewer meaningful professions to actually master, and there's very little reason to join player societies, the very communities that used to be the social glue of the whole world. And True On brings it all home with this really powerful insight. In the past, you had legendary players in every profession. The best tailor, the most famous beautician, the master tamer. These were people that new players could look up to and say, I want to be like them. But with those professions gone, that dream is gone. And with it, a core reason to play and to invest your time in the world. And so we end with the question that started this entire debate. It's a question that hangs over not just Entropia Universe, but every persistent online world out there. When the paths to success are paved over for convenience or short-term profit, what is left for players to strive for? And maybe more importantly, can a virtual world really survive without a dream?